Hollywood has never lacked stories of glamour, monuments built beneath the spotlight, and endless applause. Yet, behind that velvet curtain, there have always been people standing in the shadows, watching. People who saw not only the brilliance, but also the cracks, the decay, concealed beneath a flawless facade. Richard Widmark was one of them. Throughout a career spanning several decades, Widmark became known to the world for his unforgettable villainous roles. Murderers, psychopaths, and cold-blooded criminals on screen became his trademark. Yet in real life, he was an intellectual, a university lecturer, and a devoted husband who remained faithfully married for 55 years. That contrast not only made him a remarkable individual, but also shaped him into a deeply skeptical observer. For many years, Widmark quietly compiled a list, a kind of indictment not written on courtroom documents, but engraved through careful observation of some of Hollywood's most powerful figures. He called them hidden crimes. To Widmark, cruelty was not something grandiose or defined by sensational romantic scandals. It was cold-hearted ruthlessness, calculated selfishness, cleverly disguised beneath professionalism, natural talent, or even the image of moral virtue. Why would a decent man like Widmark keep such a list? And why did he choose to remain silent, do his job well, and return to the peace of his home rather than expose everything? The answer lay not in cowardice, but in his understanding of how the system worked. He knew that in Hollywood, moral character was often the cheapest commodity, while being useful to box office profits was what received the greatest protection. We're about to uncover that list, not to tarnish names that have become legendary, but to reflect upon an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the people we admire most are also the ones most skilled at concealing their ruthless egos. To understand why Richard Widmark became such a skeptical keeper of this list, we must look at his character. A man who entered Hollywood not through an obsession with fame, but with the composure of a university lecturer. Before the studio lights ever shone on him, Widmark was already familiar with the lecture hall, where logical thinking and meticulous preparation were guiding principles. For him, acting was not a game of ego, but an expression of professional respect. Yet the true source of Widmark's sensitivity to hidden cruelty lay in a family tragedy: his brother Donald. Donald was a Second World War veteran who returned home bearing scars not only on his body, but also severe brain trauma. Witnessing his brother's decline and transformation, from an ordinary man into a drifting shadow within his own life, taught Widmark a bitter lesson. True character is what remains when nobody is applauding. While Hollywood was busy constructing heroic images on screen, Widmark saw the pretense beneath them. He understood that a handsome military uniform or an inspiring line of dialogue could not conceal inner emptiness when basic human decency was absent. Living in a Hollywood where betrayal was called professional strategy and selfishness was labeled artistic temperament, Widmark chose a completely different path. He remained devoted to one wife for 55 years. His calmness was not weakness, it was a statement. He used that composure to observe, to see through the glittering masks, and to record what he called sweetness coated cruelty. He did not need Hollywood to acknowledge him as a good man. He only needed to ensure that he himself never became part of a machine that was gradually corrupting human values. Richard Widmark did not compile this list out of petty jealousy. He created it as a record of how some of the film industry's most powerful figures used their positions to trample on human values. Widmark believed that cruelty was not always loud, it often grew quietly from power. He observed several prominent names, individuals who turned ruthlessness into part of the filmmaking process, transforming film sets into places where talent became a shield for unethical behavior. And the first name to appear in his silent indictment was Kirk Douglas. To Richard Widmark, Kirk Douglas was more than a fellow actor. He was the embodiment of absolute control. When Widmark referred to Douglas in his list, he did not focus on his talent or the films that made him famous. Instead, he concentrated on the terror hidden behind every frame. Widmark observed that Douglas consistently turned film sets into arenas where the ultimate goal was not artistic excellence, but determining who would emerge victorious. Widmark recorded how Douglas manipulated the working environment to eliminate competition. It was not done through loud arguments or open confrontation, but through cold calculation in choosing camera angles, adjusting lighting, and even influencing how fellow actors perform. In Widmark's eyes, Douglas possessed the ability to turn everyone around him into tools for enhancing his own star status. If you refused to step aside, he would use every ounce of his power and influence to push you into the shadows of the frame. What disgusted Widmark most was the industry's conditioning. He bitterly realized that Hollywood of that era had been domesticated by Douglas's ambition. Whenever Douglas walked onto a set, the production machine seemed to adjust itself automatically to indulge, accommodate, and serve his ego before he had even spoken a word. Widmark regarded this as a form of systemic cruelty. Douglas did not need to use force because the entire system was already prepared to clear his path, leaving weaker co-stars with no option but obedience or exclusion. To Widmark, Kirk Douglas was proof that a star could consume the soul of a film simply to satisfy a personal hunger for power. But if Douglas imposed his will through authority, another figure on Widmark's list used charm as a weapon for belittling others. That figure was Frank Sinatra. Widmark, who valued preparation and mutual respect, could never accept the way the so-called voice of the century conducted himself on set. To Widmark, Sinatra's charm was not a gift offered to audiences. It was a sophisticated mask used to conceal profound arrogance towards the people around him. Widmark repeatedly witnessed Sinatra treating the time of dozens of crew members as personal property that he could take away whenever he pleased. While hundreds of people, from the lighting and sound departments to background performers, worked tirelessly to keep production on schedule, Sinatra could remain comfortably secluded in his dressing room, bringing the entire process to a standstill, simply because he had not yet found the inspiration to appear. Widmark was appalled by the coldness of such behavior. To Sinatra, those around him were not colleagues but merely pieces on a board within his personal timetable. Everything had to revolve around him. Every delay was assumed to be acceptable, and anyone who dared express dissatisfaction would be crushed by his indifference. According to Widmark's observations, Sinatra's cruelty lay in the way he used fame to establish a distorted standard of behavior. He did not merely neglect professionalism. He spread an atmosphere of contempt throughout the workplace. Widmark believed that Sinatra fully understood the extent of his power, and that he enjoyed making others wait as a way of asserting his superior status. To Widmark, no matter how talented a person might be, anyone who treated other people's time and respect as worthless was nothing more than an empty symbol, a man with the voice of an angel, but an attitude overflowing with arrogance. However, if Sinatra's arrogance was still something that could be recognized through luxury and power, Widmark's list then turned towards another figure, someone who transformed creativity into a shield for unprofessional conduct and some of the most shocking cruelty in filmmaking history. That figure was Marlon Brando. When Richard Widmark turned his attention to Marlon Brando, his criticism became sharper than ever, because he did not merely see a lazy colleague. He saw a man who used art as a shield for indifference. In Widmark's eyes, Brando's devotion to method acting was not a pursuit of artistic truth, but the perfect excuse for avoiding professional responsibility. Widmark could not tolerate someone arriving on set without learning their lines, without preparation, and treating their presence as a privilege granted to the production. For a man who regarded thorough preparation as a matter of professional ethics, Brando's carelessness was nothing less than an insult to the people working tirelessly behind the camera. What disgusted Widmark most was the way Brando treated less powerful co-stars. He believed he had seen through Brando's true nature after witnessing the contempt he displayed towards colleagues whom he regarded merely as raw material for his own artistic elevation. A notable example was the incident that caused deep emotional distress to Maria Schneider during the making of Last Tango in Paris. Widmark did not consider it an artistic breakthrough. He saw it as an abuse of power disguised as creativity. To Widmark, a truly great actor never needed to trample on the dignity or emotional well-being of fellow performers in order to achieve powerful emotional effects on screen. Through Widmark's lens, Brando's cruelty was ruthlessness hidden behind the title of eccentric genius. Hollywood had been far too willing to accept and even celebrate such destructive behavior because Brando's presence generated enormous profits. Widmark bitterly realized that the system was prepared to sacrifice the dignity of a few individuals in order to nurture the ego of an icon. He recognized the danger of idolizing people like Brando because it allowed them to behave as though they stood above both morality and accountability. To Widmark, regardless of Brando's extraordinary talent and versatility, the absence of compassion in his real life turned those cinematic achievements into evidence of a soul that had long abandoned kindness. But if Brando used talent to conceal indifference, Widmark's list led to a figure with even greater influence. A man who elevated betrayal into a complex moral theory before which the entire industry seemed willing to bow. That man was Elia Kazan. Widmark was a person who valued honor and consistency, and for that reason he could never forgive the way Kazan manipulated moral principles to justify informing on colleagues before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Widmark saw through what he considered the cunning way Kazan dealt with the greatest stain on his life. Instead of bowing his head in remorse or remaining silent in regret, Kazan chose to transform betrayal into a performance about principle and patriotism. To Widmark, this represented the highest form of cruelty. The betrayer not only destroys the careers and lives of friends, but also seizes the authority to define morality itself. Kazan succeeded in convincing Hollywood's power structure that turning one's back on friends for personal benefit was an act of necessary courage. The complexity that Kazan carefully constructed around his actions was, in Widmark's view, nothing more than an elaborate disguise for a far more basic cowardice. What angered Widmark even more was Hollywood's complicity. He bitterly concluded that the industry possessed no moral filter. It had only a profit filter. As Kazan continued to receive honors, awards, and praise as an artistic genius, it became, in Widmark's eyes, clear proof that Hollywood was willing to discard all dignity if an individual continued to generate economic value. Widmark recognized the danger of celebrating figures like Kazan. It established a precedent that talent could excuse almost any act of cruelty, even the betrayal of those who had helped build one's success. To Widmark, Kazan's career demonstrated that being useful to the system was far more powerful than almost any other consideration. It became a scar he carried within his list, a reminder that in Hollywood, those who remain standing the longest are sometimes those who climbed by sacrificing their own moral principles. And now only one final name remained on that list, a name Widmark regarded as the most unsettling and dangerous of all because it was wrapped in the appearance of absolute integrity. The final name, and the one that left Richard Widmark feeling the coldest in his silent indictment, was Henry Fonda. Widmark believed that Fonda had carried out one of Hollywood's greatest deceptions, transforming emotional distance into an image of dignity and moral authority. While the public saw Fonda as a trustworthy, principled, and warm-hearted man, Widmark saw an iceberg beyond reach. Fonda's cruelty did not come from rage or hostility. It came from complete emotional detachment in real relationships. He did not need to do anything at all. Simply standing there with his dignified appearance was enough for people to assume he was a good man. Widmark was disturbed by the realization that Fonda had used the audience's unquestioning trust to build a fortress separating himself from the real world, a place where he could remain detached from personal responsibility and genuine emotional connection with colleagues. What made Widmark regard Fonda as the most frightening name on the list was his ability to deceive even the most perceptive observers. When portraying heroes, Fonda performed so convincingly that he seemed to persuade himself that he embodied those values. Yet away from the camera, Widmark saw only a hollow and emotionally vacant man, someone who never truly connected with anyone. The danger, as Widmark saw it, was that when a person appears flawless on screen, even those who work alongside them struggle to believe that they might lack compassion. Widmark placed Fonda's name on the list not because of what he had done, but because of what he had never done. He had never truly lived as an emotionally engaged human being among his peers. To Widmark, Henry Fonda was the final proof that in Hollywood, image can be the most powerful weapon of all. It can transform an emotionally detached individual into a moral icon and turn unsettling silence into admirable authority. As he closed his notebook, Widmark understood that he had recorded the people who had won the game of appearances. Individuals protected so thoroughly by the system that the truth about their inner selves would remain forever hidden beneath masks of decency. After exposing the names behind the glamorous masks, Richard Widmark closed his notebook not with satisfaction, but with profound sadness for the industry to which he had devoted his entire life. His conclusion, and the central lesson of this project, was a stark truth about how Hollywood operates. The system never protects decent people. It protects people who generate profit. Widmark bitterly realized that usefulness was the most powerful form of protection. Hollywood did not care whether you were manipulative, arrogant, or emotionally detached, as long as you could fill cinemas, generate revenue, and sustain the myths that kept the production machine turning. The names on his list were not exceptions. They were the system's favorites, carefully created and nurtured as symbols. In such an environment, genuine moral character often became a luxury, easily discarded whenever it stood in the way of success. Because he understood this harsh reality so clearly, Widmark chose silence. He knew that confronting these icons was not merely a battle against individuals, but against an entire system of public belief. He chose to do his work well on screen, and then return home to his family, the only place where kindness did not require performance. He carried the list with him as evidence that truth often loses to box office revenue and dreams constructed from carefully crafted illusions. This project concludes with one final reminder for anyone captivated by the glow of Hollywood. Never confuse exceptional talent with genuine moral character. Behind every radiant smile on the red carpet, behind every heroic performance that moves millions of hearts, there may exist a cold emptiness visible only to quiet observers like Widmark. His list serves as a warning to keep one's eyes open, so that the glamour of art does not obscure the true measure of human character. The journey of exposing Hollywood's masks has only just begun. Richard Widmark's stories are merely the opening pages of our new chapter, Tragedy Behind the Glory. We have already explored some of the biggest names, yet countless shadows within the film capital remain unexplored. Do not forget to follow the upcoming episodes, where we will continue to uncover hidden corners, places where the truth can sometimes be even more shocking than the greatest classic films ever made.